You're huddled in the back of a cave. It's roughly 40,000 BC. Outside, a severe winter is raging, the kind of absolute bone-snapping colds that ancient humans had to survive with nothing but animal skins and a campfire. There are no heaters. There's no weather app telling you when the storm will pass. There is just the dark, the howling wind, and the terrifying realization that you are completely, helplessly at the mercy of elements you do not understand. Suddenly, a massive strike of lightning splits the night sky, instantly setting a lone pine tree ablaze. The thunder is so loud you can feel it in your teeth. Now, if you're a modern human, you know this is just atmospheric static electricity discharging. But if you're that ancient hunter-gatherer, shivering in the dark, watching a column of fire descend from the sky with a deafening roar, you don't think about electrons. You think someone is very, very angry. And somewhere, in that terrifying, awe-inspiring moment, a fundamental shift happened in the human brain. We stopped just surviving the world, and we started negotiating with it. This is the story of how humans first believed in God. Not organized religion, not theology, not the massive institutions that define modern history. We are talking about the very first time a human being looked at a chaotic, dangerous, indifferent universe and thought, there is a mind behind all of this. And why that single cognitive leap might be the most powerful survival mechanism our species ever developed. Because here's the thing about belief. It didn't start with a book. It didn't start with a prophet. It started with a shadow in the grass. Let's talk about the brain. Specifically, your brain, which is functionally identical to the brain of a human walking around 50,000 years ago. Evolutionary psychologists talk about a concept, the hyperactive agency detection device, or HAD for short. It sounds complicated, but it's actually incredibly simple, and it dictates almost everything about how we perceive the world. Imagine you are an early human, walking through the tall grass of the African savanna. Suddenly, you hear a rustling sound behind you. You have two choices. Choice A, you assume the rustling is just the wind. It's an inanimate, random act of nature. Choice B, you assume the rustling is a lion stalking you. In other words, you assume agency. You assume there is a living, thinking being with intentions causing that sound. If you choose A and it's the wind, you're fine. But if you choose A and it is a lion, you are lunch. Your genes do not get passed on. You are removed from the evolutionary pool. If you choose B and it's just the wind, you get a little startled, your heart rate spikes, but you survive. And if you choose B and it is a lion, you run, and you live to see another day. Evolution is a brutal numbers game. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the humans who survived were the ones who were biologically hardwired to over-detect agency. We evolved to see faces in the clouds, to hear voices in the white noise, to assume that a rustling bush is a predator. We are the descendants of the paranoid, the ones who assumed the universe was full of invisible, intentional beings. But here's where it gets interesting. Once your brain is wired to see a who behind every what, you can't just turn it off. When an early human saw a boulder roll down a hill and crush their friend, they didn't think about gravity or erosion. They thought, who pushed that rock? And why are they mad at us? When a river suddenly flooded, washing away their campsite, it wasn't seasonal precipitation. The river was an entity. It had a temper. It had desires. This is what anthropologists call animism, the earliest known form of human spirituality. It is the belief that everything in the world has a spirit. The trees, the rocks, the rivers, the weather. It wasn't a religion. It was a completely logical way of categorizing the world, based on the hardware available to the ancient human brain. If humans act with intention, and animals act with intention, then surely the storm acting with such violent force must also have an intention. And if the storm has an intention, that means it can be reasoned with. Think about how massive of a psychological relief that must have been. The prehistoric world was terrifying and entirely out of human control. Diseases wiped out families. Winters starved entire tribes. Predators hunted us. But if the river has a spirit, maybe you can offer it a piece of meat so it doesn't flood. If the winter is a spirit, maybe you can sing to it so it leaves early. Belief gave early humans an illusion of control. And in a world where despair could literally kill you, the psychological resilience provided by that illusion was an absolute evolutionary superpower. Now, let's look at the archaeology, because the physical evidence of this shift is deeply moving. When we look for the earliest signs of human belief, we don't look for temples, we look for graves. For millions of years, early hominids like Homo habilis or Australopithecus died, and their bodies were left where they fell or scavenged by animals. Death was just the end of biological function. But around 100,000 years ago, something astonishing begins to appear in the archaeological record. We start finding intentional burials. At a cave site in Israel called Kafse, archaeologists found the remains of early modern humans dating back roughly 90,000 to 100,000 years. These weren't just bodies tossed into a pit. They were carefully arranged. Red ochre, a vibrant natural pigment, was deliberately scattered over the remains. Grave goods, tools, animal bones, shells were placed beside the bodies. Why? Why would a struggling, starving prehistoric tribe waste perfectly good tools by burying them in the dirt with a dead body? Because they no longer believed the dead were actually gone. Placing tools in a grave means you think the person is going somewhere else, and they're going to need those tools when they get there. It is the first physical evidence of a belief in an afterlife. It's the realization that human consciousness, the voice inside your head, the personality of your loved ones, feels too complex, too real to just vanish when the breathing stops. The body breaks, but the spirit must continue. This is the dawn of the shaman. As these early tribes navigated this spirit-filled world, certain individuals began to act as the intermediaries. The shaman wasn't a priest in the modern sense. They were the early psychonauts, the healers, the ones who went into trances, often using the very smoke and psychoactive plants we talked about before, to negotiate with the invisible world. They painted the massive, sweeping images of bison and lions on the walls of caves like Lascaux and Chavaux in France. Those paintings, deep in pitch black, suffocatingly tight cave systems, weren't interior decoration. You don't crawl a mile underground with a flickering torch just to doodle. You go down there because it is the underworld. It is the womb of the earth. Those paintings were spells. They were a way to capture the spirit of the animal so the hunters would succeed the next day. It was magic. But for tens of thousands of years, these spirits and animal gods were local. Your tribe had its spirits. The tribe across the valley had theirs. The gods were small, tied to a specific mountain or a specific river. So how did we get from a local river spirit to the massive, omnipotent, all-seeing gods that dominate human history today? To answer that, we have to talk about the greatest and most stressful transition in human history, the agricultural revolution. For 200,000 years, humans lived in small bands of about 50 to 150 people. Everyone knew everyone. If you stole someone's food or if you lied, the whole tribe knew by sunset, and you were likely kicked out. In the Ice Age, being kicked out of the group meant death. Gossip and social reputation were enough to keep everyone behaving. You didn't need a cosmic police force. You just needed your neighbors to not hate you.
But around 12,000 years ago, the ice receded. The climate stabilized. Humans started planting wheat and domesticating animals. And suddenly, we weren't living in groups of 100 anymore. We were living in settlements of 1,000, then cities of 10,000, then empires of 1,000,000. This created a massive, unprecedented biological problem. The human brain is not designed to trust thousands of strangers. How do you trade with someone you've never met? How do you know the guy from the other side of the city isn't going to rob you? You can't rely on tribal gossip anymore because the population is simply too large. We needed a new way to bind people together. We needed a new social technology. Enter the big gods. Psychologists and historians have noted a fascinating pattern. As societies get larger and more complex, their gods get bigger, more powerful, and significantly more moralistic. The local river spirit didn't care if you stole from a stranger, it just wanted its sacrifice. But an omniscient, all-powerful God, who lives in the sky and watches your every move, a God who knows your thoughts and will punish you in the afterlife if you break the rules, that changes everything. Suddenly, you can do business with a total stranger from a different city, because even though you don't know him, you both fear the same all-seeing God. If he cheats you, lightning might strike him, or he might burn in the underworld. The invention of moralizing omnipotent gods was the ultimate social glue. It allowed massive groups of unrelated humans to cooperate, to build, to share resources, and to march into battle together. Tribes that developed these big gods could form larger, more cohesive armies. They conquered tribes with smaller, localized belief systems. The belief in a shared, watching God had immense, undeniable survival value on a civilizational scale. You can literally see this pivot point in the archaeology at a place called Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. It is, by all accounts, the oldest temple in the world. It dates back an astonishing 11,500 years. This place is massive. We're talking intricately carved stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in massive circles, covered with reliefs of scorpions, foxes, and vultures. Building Göbekli Tepe would have required the coordinated effort of hundreds, if not thousands, of people over generations. But here is the truly insane part. Göbekli Tepe was built before agriculture was fully established in the region. For a long time, historians believed that humans invented farming, got enough food to settle down, and then built temples because they finally had free time. Göbekli Tepe flipped the script entirely. Hunter-gatherers built it, people who were still chasing wild game and foraging for berries. They came together to build a monumental religious site. It strongly suggests that the desire to worship together, to create a shared sacred space, actually predates our desire to settle down. We didn't build temples because we invented cities. We may have invented cities so we could stay near our temples. Religion didn't follow civilization. Religion might have been the catalyst that caused civilization. As the centuries bled into millennia, the stories became more codified. The oral traditions passed around campfires were eventually written down, on clay tablets in Mesopotamia, on papyrus in Egypt, and on scrolls in the Levant. The smoke of the shaman's fire was replaced by the incense of the cathedral, but the underlying architecture, the deeply human impulse driving it all, that has never changed. We look at the history of religion and we often see division, wars, and dogma, and those things are absolutely there. But beneath all the historical noise, the origin of God is fundamentally a story of human vulnerability. It's the story of a fragile, hairless ape waking up in a universe that is terrifyingly large, violently unpredictable, and vastly indifferent. And instead of breaking under the weight of that reality, that ape used its brilliantly evolving brain to project meaning onto the chaos. When that ancient human looked out into the freezing dark and imagined a spirit in the storm, they weren't being stupid. They were exercising the highest form of cognitive empathy. They were trying to build a relationship with the universe. They were saying, "I am here. I see you. Please see me." We survived the predators, the ice, and the endless nights, not just because we had fire or sharp stones, but because we could tell each other a story about a higher power that made the dark feel a little less empty.
Whether you view God as a divine truth revealed to humanity, or as the greatest, most beautiful coping mechanism the human brain ever invented, the result is the same. The belief in something greater than ourselves gave us the courage to step out of the cave, and we haven't stopped walking since.